episode of the Dark Assassins podcast, the show that dives deep into not just technology, but the concepts, software, and procedures behind it all, and explains it so simply that even your grandma can understand it. As always, I'm your host, the Dark Assassin. So this week, of course, was the Apple September event, aka the iPhone event, aka awe-dropping. It was a very interesting event, especially in the beginning where like Tim Cook, it started out in like the daylight and then partway through it turned into like a nighttime shot, which was kind of interesting. But as far as the updates go, it was kind of a mixed bag of things that were very impressive and very compelling. And then some other things that were kind of head scratchers, if you will. So we're going to be getting into that in this episode. And since there's so much to cover, we're just going to jump right on into it. Now, I kind of alluded to it a little bit when talking about the kind of the contrast, how Tim Cook started the keynote with it being all daylight and everything and then turning into more of a night shot. But I will say their transition, like aside from the transitions like back to whoever the other host was, where they just kind of did like a fade thing, the cinematography was pretty spectacular. Now, this is something Apple's been pretty well known for in their keynotes, basically since they started doing these virtual ones and not like the on-stage live ones. But, like, they had some very impressive drone shots and just the cinematography in general was pretty outstanding. Now, I'm not necessarily like a camera or video guy, obviously, but just kind of looking at it was quite the piece of eye candy, which I mean it makes sense because they had to at least have some eye candy in the keynote. Seeing that our boy Air Force One, aka Craig Federighi, wasn't there to serve as the eye candy for us. So they had to have some eye candy in there somewhere, so I guess they decided to go with drone shots instead. But like we said when we did our last episode, it's not necessarily a surprise that Craig was not in this keynote because this wasn't a software related update at all. This is all hardware changes. Now, they did talk a little bit about software here and there with like some updates like coming with these new devices and iOS 26 and all that, but the point still remains that it was a hardware first event, so Craig Federighi was at least not visually in attendance. So let's start with how Apple started the keynote with AirPods. So they dropped a new line of AirPods Pro 3. They were rumored to have like a new design. I think the design technically was slightly modified at least a little bit to better like fit in your ears or something. I don't know. It basically looked the same to me. Although I haven't really done a side to side comparison test. Um, but they did make some updates to, I guess, part of the design in the sense that they added better controls for airflow to improve the audio quality for the AirPods Pro, because when you kind of jam something into your ear, like it kind of creates like a pocket of air. So having, I guess, some kind of airflow or something to help with that, I guess, improves things. I don't know. I'm not an audio engineer. I don't know what I'm talking about. But Apple is also touting improved noise cancellation. Both as far as the better fit in the ear, but also they're adding new foam tips. Basically putting new foam infused inside the ear tips to improve kind of the I guess that seal, if you will, in your ear from the AirPod going in your ears. And they are touting 2 times better noise canceling performance over the AirPods Pro 2, or if you're an OG AirPods Pro user like me, they're touting a 4 times noise canceling performance increase compared to the OG ones. And if I'm being honest, the first gen ones were the noise canceling was pretty good. Now, it wasn't perfect, obviously. Like, if you're having a conversation with someone, you can still very much hear them. Like, it's not like super clear or anything, but you can still hear that someone's talking. If there's kind of like abrupt noise changes or something, you're definitely going to be able to hear those. But for your kind of static background noise type thing, think of, being on a plane, being on a train, something like that, or in a car, where there's just kind of that static drone of noise. They did a fantastic job of canceling that out. Like, I've done a decent amount of flying over the past like 7, 8, 9 months or so, and the AirPods Pro have been fantastic on planes because I basically forget I'm on a plane. Because if you've ever flown before, there's all that like cabin noise from flying. It's not exactly the most quiet environment, but just sticking the AirPods Pro in, turning on the noise cancellation, basically eliminates all of it, especially when I'm listening to music or watching a movie or something like that. So I am very interested to see what this 4x improvement actually sounds like, because they're on top of that, they're also touting better audio quality too. So, and I also skipped a generation, so yeah, it will be very, very interesting to see how they do. Another feature that's coming is live translation for the AirPods Pro. So this is done via a gesture that you can do like with the AirPods Pro, and it'll basically turn on this live translation feature. And it will reduce the transparency of the AirPods a little bit to try to block out a little bit of what the person's actually saying, just so when it's translating and speaking it into your ears, you're not kind of trying to confuse what they're actually saying versus what you're listening to. You can get a more clear picture of the audio coming through. And then also, if the other person is not wearing AirPods Pro 3, I guess, or using live translation, you can display what when you talk, it'll display on your iPhone, what you're saying in the language that they're talking to in, so they can read that. But of course, Apple had to tout that everyone should have AirPods Pro 3 because during this section, they're like, but the experience is even better if both of you have AirPods Pro 3. It's like, yeah, kind of saw that one coming. But at the same time, that way you don't have to worry about the weird iPhone middleman. You both just talk normally, and it'll translate in both of your native languages so you can hear what the other person's saying. So, pretty cool. The other thing to note is the translation is done through computational audio in the AirPods themselves, and that is paired with your iPhone. I guess one of the AI models or something on the phone that runs locally to do that translation. So you don't have to worry about is this all this translation data getting sent to the cloud somewhere. At least according to Apple, all of it's being done locally on device, which is very nice to see for those of us who are very privacy focused. The other nice thing about them is they're now coming with 5 ear tip sizes. I'm not sure what the AirPods Pro 2 came with, but I know at least the original ones only came with 3. So the additional ear tips will probably help more people be able to wear them more comfortably, since that was another thing that they touted, that this new generation is supposed to be like the most like have the best fit and be able to fit in the most variety of ears, I guess. And I think they mentioned some study as well that they did for like testing. The other nice thing is they are now IP57 sweat and water resistant, so you don't necessarily have to worry you don't have to worry about being out in the rain or something, and worrying about your AirPods getting water damage. Now, I have definitely been out in the rain before with my AirPods, and they might have gotten a little bit wet. They didn't have any issues, but at least now it's nice that you don't have to worry about that. If you're out in like the rain or something, you don't have to worry about them getting splashed on or getting a little damp, because they have this water resistance rating. The other kind of notable update with the AirPods Pro 3 is a heart rate sensing feature during workouts. So they also mentioned in this segment that you can also track calories in the fitness app, but With just the AirPods Pro 3. So like you just I guess have your phone, your AirPods Pro 3 in your ears, no Apple Watch or anything like that, and it can track your calories burned. I'm not exactly sure how accurate that's going to be. Just because I don't know how accurately a AirPod in your ear just tracking your heart rate would be able to track calories burned. So call me a little bit skeptical on that one, but I guess at the real thing that matters is as long as it's consistent, I guess that's kind of the big thing. Like if it's off by say like 20 calorie, I don't know that 20 calories is a bad example just because it depends on how long your workout is, because like if you're 20 calories off and it says you burned like say 1,000 calories, that's actually not too bad. But if you're 20 calories off and it says you only burned 30 calories, that's a little more egregious. But I think the point still stands as long as it's consistent with how wrong it is, or even maybe how right it is. That's really what you kind of need if you want to try to like track how many calories you're burning. As long as the metrics you're getting are consistent, that's kind of the most important thing. Because the main thing you want to be looking for when like it comes to fitness stuff is like trends. You don't necessarily care too much about like individual data points, but you just kind of want to be focusing more on the trends. So if you notice that your it scores your calorie burns consistently, whether that be accurate or inaccurate, as long as the trends are, going where you want them to go. I guess that's really all that matters. Um, let's see what else. So the other thing that was very impressive about the AirPods Pro 3 is they get an increase in battery life from 6 hours to 8 hours on a single charge with noise cancellation on, and 10 hours with transparency on. Now that's compared to the second gen AirPods Pro the second gen AirPods Pro. If you had the original ones like I do, I'm pretty sure that was only like 4 hours at best. And I think the 4 hour mark was with transparency. And I want to say noise canceling was maybe three, or maybe it was 4 hours with noise canceling and then like 5 with transparency. I don't remember, but definitely less. So this is definitely going to be a big improvement in battery life. Especially if you're coming from older AirPods Pro, especially if you've been wearing them for a while, there's probably been a little bit of battery degradation. So that's definitely going to be a nice bonus for you. And the price also remains the same at $249. Pre-orders are available now, and they will be globally available, so you can pre-order them now, and they'll be available on September 19th. And yeah, I mentioned in the last episode when we were talking, like, what to expect. And I was kind of on the fence, like, the AirPods Pro 3 might convince me to upgrade. And watching the keynote and reading through these specs again, I think Apple's going to be taking more of my money with this one, because I'm not necessarily sure I'll pre-order, which I don't know. Once I'm done recording this, I might go pre-order them. I don't know. But I do definitely. I think I want them, because nothing wrong with my current AirPods Pro. They've been working fantastically. I don't really have any major complaints. Battery life on planes is kind of hit or miss sometimes. Sometimes they'll die before I'm done using them, which is kind of a bummer. But the nice thing about AirPods, though, is you literally just pop them in the charging case for a couple minutes. You pop them back in, and you got a lot more listening time. So that is pretty nice. But yeah, and but mainly I'm interested to kind of see how much better this noise cancellation is, especially considering it's supposedly 4 times better than the ones that I have, as well as the larger battery life and increase and better audio quality. So I think I will be getting some, and if slash when I do, I will definitely bring an update on the podcast for sure. The next thing that Apple talked about was the Apple Watch, and in true Apple fashion, if you've watched any of the keynotes in the past few years when they've done anything related to the Apple Watch, they always, always, always start the Apple Watch segment with a kind of a montage of all the different, well, not all, but a large collection of instances and cases of the Apple Watch saving somebody's life or improving their fitness in some way, or basically improving their life to a significant degree, if not outright saving their life. So again, Apple did that this year, which definitely wasn't a surprise. But I mean, some of the stories that they are a little, I guess, touching when you hear some of them. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Getting into the meat and potatoes, they started off with the new Series 11 Apple Watch. They're claiming that it's 2 times more scratch resistant. If you're someone that's interested in getting the cellular model now comes with 5G capability, so I guess that's kind of cool. It has a new heart sensor to monitor blood pressure. Now, it won't necessarily give you like your, accurate blood pressure reading, but it's more or less in line with how the temperature sensor worked, where it'll just kind of give you trend data to basically say, like, if possible hypertension, in this case, of if you're at risk for potential possible hypertension, it'll kind of alert you of that. But it won't necessarily tell you your exact blood pressure readings, which for medical reasons, I'm not sure they actually can tell you those actual numbers, just because uh yeah, for medical reasons. But now, in terms of kind of another health related feature, they've been doing sleep tracking stuff for years now, but now they're finally coming out with a sleep score. So it's unclear from the keynote if this is specifically a Series 11 feature or one of the other ones that's they've released in this keynote, or if this is a watchOS 26 feature. I would be inclined to believe that this is a watchOS 26 feature and not specifically to the 3 new Apple Watches they unveiled, partly because there's no like additional sensors or anything that go into the sleep score. It's literally just taking all the sleep data that currently exists and creating a score out of it. So I don't see that being restricted to these new watches. I would think that it would be coming to all watchOS 26 uh, compatible watches, but they didn't explicitly say that in the keynote. But if I had to guess, I would say if you have a watch that is watchOS 26 compatible, you're probably going to get this feature, would be my guess. Um, but basically, how they talked about the sleep score being calculated is it's based on a couple different metrics. So it's based on how many times you woke up in the middle of the night, how long you slept for, when you went to bed, time of sleep, time in each sleep stage, that kind of a thing. They're also claiming up to 24 hours of battery life for the Series 11, and it's also starting at $399. Of course, that is for the non-cellular model. The cellular model obviously is going to cost a little more than that. And then they unveiled the SE3. So this time, the SE now comes with an always-on display, which the other watches have had for at least a few years now. It gets the gestures that have been released in the past few years, like the whole like flick to like dismiss and like the tapping with your fingers thing. Those are now coming to the SE. It adds wrist temperature sensing. So we just kind of like talked about that a little bit ago, how that's kind of similar to the heart rate sensing, where it doesn't necessarily give you the exact data, but it'll kind of give you trends and stuff. It gets the sleep apnea notifications and the sleep score, which sleep apnea notifications I think was either on last year's watch or the previous year. I don't remember exactly. But one of the funny features that they talked about was that you can now play audio from the speaker on the Apple Watch SE3, which I guess maybe I didn't realize that you couldn't do that before. Um, and also, I'm not sure how many people are realistically playing audio from their watch, like out of the speaker. Now, I'm sure there are people that exist, of course, but I don't know. I just have trouble finding a use case for it. But I'm also not an Apple Watch wearer, so maybe that's part of the reason why. And I think most people, not, of course, this isn't everyone, but I feel like most people that have an Apple Watch also have an iPhone, or some other kind of larger device that they could, show videos on or play audio through, or just be using Bluetooth headphones or something. So I'm not entirely sure the use case here. I'm sure there is one that exists. But it's just a, I guess, an interesting feature. Obviously, it's nice to have. Not complaining about it, but it's just an interesting note that they made. They're also claiming an 18-hour battery life on the SE3, and they're also saying that fast charging is now up to 2 times faster than the previous SE, and you can get 15 minutes of charge for if for well. Excuse me. With 15 minutes of charge, you can get up to 8 hours of use, is what they're claiming, and it starts at 24 or yeah, $249. There we go. And then the final Apple Watch they released was the Ultra 3. It's the same size as the previous Ultras, but the screen size is slightly larger, so they just kind of reduced the bezel size a little bit. They were touting a higher refresh rate, 5G cellular capabilities, as well as satellite connectivity. Now, based on the keynote, it kind of looks like you need to have an active cellular plan in order to make use of the satellite connectivity, which I guess makes sense. They're also touting that the satellite feature is included for the first 2 years. Now, it's still unclear what happens after the 2 years expire because I'm not sure they ever charged or came up with a plan for the iPhones when they first announced satellite on those. Because I'm pretty sure when the 14 came out, which I believe was the first one with satellite, once the 2 years kind of came close to coming up, they were like, we'll just extend it for another year and kind of kick the can down the road. Maybe I'm just ignorant or didn't like actually read what the whatever the thing was, but I've never seen any like definitive information on what happens after this quote unquote trial period expires. So I don't know if they're actually going to make people pay for it or if it just stops working or if they just indefinitely extend it. I have no idea. So I just thought that was interesting because they said the same thing when they first announced it with the iPhones. And at least as far as I don't know if they really came out with a definitive what happens after the trial period, I guess, if you will. If you do know the answer, and you're listening on YouTube, definitely leave a comment down below. Or if you know when you're listening on podcast, you can shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com because I would be interested to know the answer if you do know it. And they're touting 42 hours of battery life with the Ultra 3, and it starts at $799. All of the watches are available for pre-order today and will be available on September 19th. So now we move into the iPhones. Now, this kind of if you listen to last episode where we talked about kind of what to expect, for the most part those like rumors and speculation were correct. So starting off with the iPhone 17, one thing that was kind of interesting was the display is now 6.3 inches compared to 6.1 inches, although the physical size is the same. It's just they shrunk the bezels a little bit, so you get a little bit more screen real estate. The most notable feature, I think, is ProMotion. So if you have been living under a rock or you haven't had a Pro iPhone or anything like that, ProMotion was exclusive to the Pro line of iPhones, I believe starting with the iPhone 13 Pro. And it's only been a Pro iPhone feature up until this year. Now, this year, every new phone in Apple's lineup, so the 17, spoiler alert, 17 Air, and the 17 Pro and Pro Max, all of them get ProMotion, which is the high refresh 120 hertz displays that can also go down to 1 hertz. So this was very interesting. I definitely wasn't expecting that. Now, back when I bought my 13 Pro, one of the driving reasons for me to buy that over, say, just the generic 13 was because of the high refresh rate screen. So now that it's actually it's standard across all iPhone models, I think makes all of the iPhones a better value because you're not missing out on that feature. Because I will say, the 120 hertz refresh rate is so nice, and it's very very hard to go back to at least like a kind of like a phone screen that's not that. They also have an increased brightness up to 3000 nits. They also unveiled a new ceramic shield. They're calling it Ceramic Shield 2, which they're claiming a 3 times better scratch resistance compared to, I guess, the previous ceramic shield. They also did some, I guess, some tweaks and updates to like the display and like the screen itself to reduce the glare of it. So if you're kind of out in like sunny conditions or whatever and there's glare, hopefully that will be a better viewing experience. All iPhones this year still have the dynamic island. Not entirely sure when slash if that's gonna go away. It was rumored that at some point it'll just be a like all display front. But those kind of rumors were circulating back when the iPhone 10 came out. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a while yet, probably till we get an all-screen iPhone. I did kind of think to myself when the 13 line came out and I upgraded that, I'll just wait until they just go all screen. I don't think I'm gonna be able to wait that long. Probably not going to be upgrading this year, but still, probably within like the next year or two at the latest, I'll probably end up upgrading, and I highly doubt that they'll go to an all-screen design by then, but I would be happy to be proven wrong. So the other notable update with this iPhone 17 is it gets the new A19 chip. It's on the same 3 nanometer process. It has an updated display engine for the ProMotion capabilities, and also the always on display as well. It has an updated neural engine because, of course, it has to, because Apple Intelligence. It has a 6-core CPU with 2 performance and 4 efficiency cores and a 5-core GPU. As far as the batteries concerned, they were very ambiguous when it came to the keynote. Although I did look up on the website to actually get what numbers they were claiming. But in the keynote, they just said all day battery life, which is very specific, of course. But digging into the website, they did claim up to 30 hours of video playback. And they also claimed 8 more hours of video playback compared to the 16. And you can, through faster wired charging, you can get from 0% to 50% in 20 minutes. And here is a very interesting claim that they made, which kind of left me scratching my head. They said just 10 minutes of charge gives you 8 hours of video playback. That one left me scratching my head a little bit. Now, I didn't like go super deep crunching numbers or anything, but I don't know. 25, so assuming your phone was dead and we take the 0 to 50% in 20 minutes, so if you basically cut that in half with 10 minutes, so you're at 25%. So 8 hours of video playback on 25% battery. I don't know. That seems a little far-fetched for me. Now, maybe it's accurate, but I don't know. I don't know, it just seems off. Now, maybe it's correct, I don't know, but I don't know, just something about seeing a phone with 25% battery and being like, "Oh yeah, I still got 8 hours of video playback with this." I don't know about that. That's just hard for me to understand, I guess. Moving into the camera section, so they have what they're calling a fusion camera, which is a 48 megapixel camera. The fusion part, I believe, comes from they're kind of conjoining like multiple cameras into one. So there's two cameras. There's only two cameras, but you get an ultra wide, a regular, and a 2x telephoto lens, even though you only have two cameras. So that's kind of, I guess, where the fusion aspect comes into play. And they also touted that each camera has its own dedicated image pipeline. So I guess that's pretty cool. On the front of the phone, there on all iPhones that they announce comes a new center stage front facing camera, is what they're calling it. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this is per se like it's going to follow you around the frame per se, but they basically created a larger sensor, I guess. It's more of a square rather than like a rectangle. And the cool thing about it was it allows you to switch between portrait and landscape photos without actually having to change the orientation of the phone. So before, like if you wanted to take, say, like a selfie with friends or something, and you couldn't fit them all in the frame, you basically had to turn the phone sideways and hold it out. But then that, at least according to Apple, they claim that that made it weird for taking selfies because now the camera's kind of off to the side, so you're not looking straight on at the screen, so people's eyes are not looking the correct way. I don't know if you can tell, I don't really take a whole lot of selfies. But yeah, so but the cool thing about it was like you can just kind of like tap in the settings to change like different aspect ratios of how the screen will look, whether it's like portrait or like landscape. So that's pretty cool that you don't have to worry about changing the phone. And there's also an improved stabilization when it comes to shooting videos as well. So that was also kind of nice to see. And probably one of the most impressive features of all of the phones this year is all of them now come standard with 256 gigs of storage. So that I think that probably deserves a round of applause. Now I guess we just need to get them to upgrade from 256 on some of the base Mac lines, and we'll be cooking with gas. So the other thing I guess to point out is the colors for the iPhone 17. So there's a lavender color, a sage color, which to me kind of looks like green, which I guess sage is a shade of green. And then there's mist blue, white, and black, and the starting price is still the same at $799. And then moving into the iPhone Air. So Apple is claiming that it's the thinnest iPhone ever at 5.6 millimeters. Now, Apple would say iPhone 6 millimeters thin, but saying something millimeters or inches thin just sounds weird. We'll talk normally on this podcast. 5.6 millimeters thick. And I will say, with how thin the actual phone is, the camera bump, or in this case, camera bar, sticks out even more like a sore thumb than previous iPhones. So previously on iPhones, everyone kind of knows this. The camera protrusion has gotten more and more egregious over the past few years, basically starting with the iPhone 6 line when there started to be a kind of a bump out for the camera, and basically ever since then the camera bump has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's just an entire bar that takes up the entire back of the phone and sticks out like a mountain, or as Apple would call it, sticks up like a plateau, because that's apparently what they're calling this thing. They're not calling it a camera bump, they're calling it a plateau. So let me excuse my previous incorrect language of calling it a camera bump or camera bar, because it is a plateau. And I will I guess, give Apple a little bit of credit here. It's not because they wanted to put a bigger camera on a phone and there was no room in the phone. I mean, I guess that still is partly true, but the reason why this plateau is so large is because they're putting a large portion of the actual phone itself, so things like logic board, camera, speakers, all that kind of stuff. Basically everything except the battery is going into this plateau, which, if you look at it that way, I guess it's kind of impressive. But also at the same time, with how thin they made it, it's not like there's anywhere else that you could put this stuff and still have a respectable battery in there because of how thin it is. Um, so yeah, basically everything that makes up the phone is kind of housed in this plateau. And but the thing is, I don't know. It's just kind of weird because I don't know if you can necessarily call this the thinnest iPhone ever when you got this absolute chonker of a plateau sticking out the back of it, right? Like if you look at it, it's like, yes, it's so thin, it's so thin, it's so thin. Oh boy, it's really thick. Okay, it's thin again. Right? Like there's this just massive piece that's kind of sticking off the back, and I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I guess if you're gonna slap a case on it, I mean, I guess this is the other thing with the case too, right? Like I know I guess looking at my iPhone 13 Pro right now, the camera bump, the case itself has like a protective thing that goes around where the camera bump is. So if you put that on the like iPhone 17 Air, like it's just going to make it even bigger. And I just don't know, like, because I know a lot of people use cases with their iPhones, right? And if you're using a case with this massive protrusion out the back of the phone, I'm not sure like how the super thinness of it is really going to correlate to how thin it actually is like in your hand or in your pocket or something like that when I guess it obviously depends on what kind of case you put on it, assuming you even put one on there. But yeah, definitely just really interesting. Now, they were claiming it was made from titanium and they touted how strong it is with the ceramic shield and everything. So, theoretically, I guess this will help with a prevention of Bengate 2.0. Um, but I think in Marquez Brownlee's review of the keynote, he had a pretty good comment where he said basically said something to the effect of everybody's going to have their eyes glued to Jerry Rig Everything's channel because he is absolutely going to try to bend this thing in half. So that will be kind of interesting to see. The notable omission, though, which I know some people were speculating about, is there is now no more stereo speakers with the iPhone 17 Air, which I guess makes sense because how thin it is, there's not really any room for them. The display also, like I said, also gets promotion. It's a 6.5-inch display compared to the 6.3, so it's going to be a slightly larger footprint. Also gets the always-on display and 3,000 nits of brightness. The same ceramic shield too, with the 3 times better scratch resistance. And also the back glass now is 4 times more resistant to cracks than the previous back glass. And I guess one notable change with this compared to the iPhone 17 is the iPhone 17 Air gets the A19 Pro chip, although it is the binned version of the chip. Which we'll see when we get to the Pro line of phones. Same 3 nanometer process, same updated display engine for the always on display and everything. Updated neural engine. It's got a 6-core CPU, same 2 performance, 4 efficiency. It has what Apple is touting as improved branch prediction for the performance cores and a larger cache size for the efficiency cores to help improve performance. Now, branch prediction probably sounds like a bunch of computer science mumbo jumbo, which it kind of is. But essentially, what that means is branch prediction is how your CPU is able to guess what the most likely outcome of a comparison operator is and basically preload that code into memory so you don't have to worry about fetching that and kind of burning CPU cycles, which on the face of it doesn't sound like that would really speed things up that much, but as we discussed with the whole cache optimization issue, a couple milliseconds potentially here or there adds up significantly over the course of the runtime of a program. So it definitely does add up if you can accurately predict which branch is going to execute, preload that code, and start executing it rather than having to wait to fetch that memory, bring it in, and start execution. Um, so, kind of an example of that is the CPU can essentially guess if an if statement is usually false. So, say you're kind of executing the same code over and over, say in like a for loop or something, and basically every time up until this point, the if condition has always been false. The CPU will most likely preemptively load the code that would go after the if statement, basically skipping over it. So if it actually is false, the code's already loaded there and the CPU can just continue executing. There's no need to actually load anything else in. So that is why improved branch prediction is definitely pretty good for performance speedups. And they're also touting that the new A19 Pro is faster and more efficient. It gets a 5-core GPU. It gets their second gen dynamic cache architecture, which they announced last year, the first gen one. They also doubled the 16-bit floating point math rate. So when it comes to like GPUs, floating point numbers is kind of a big thing when doing graphics type calculations. So improved 16-bit floating point math is definitely a good improvement. It has a new unified image compression feature as well. And also has neural accelerators for each individual GPU core. So in this case, 5. And they're touting 3 times performance of GPU compute compared to the A18 Pro. And this was a direct quote: MacBook Pro level of performance in an iPhone. I mean, I guess, I mean, technically speaking, I guess a lot of the older iPhones, you could even claim that if you, as long as you were comparing them to like an Intel MacBook Pro. So I guess it kind of depends on what your MacBook Pro computer you're comparing it to is. Um, so then they also announced a couple new chips as well going into this phone, that being the N1 chip, which is kind of their own in-house networking chip, to their own custom chip to do things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that kind of a thing. So it has Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, and Thread. And this also is not to be confused with the C1 chip, which they announced for the iPhone 16e, that deals with cellular capability. But speaking of the C1 chip, they announced the C1X chip, which is 2 times faster than the C1. And honestly, I'm not sure why they just didn't call this the C2. Maybe because it's in the same year as the C1. I don't know. With the 2 times performance increase, though, I kind of would have thought they would have just gone with C2 anyway, but I guess not. It's also supposed to draw or use 30% less power than I guess the C1. And so this is a really interesting quote, because the iPhone 17 Air was the second iPhone they announced for the 3 iPhones that they announced. And they claimed that it was the most power efficient iPhone ever. But the reason why this is interesting, well, they also, of course, touted all day battery life. Again, very, very specific, I know. But the reason why it's interesting, because they said it was the most power efficient iPhone ever. But when we talked about the iPhone 17, we said that it gets up to, what did we say? It gets up to 30 hours of battery life. I think that's what we said here. Let me scroll back up through my notes here. I know, very, very professional. Yes, the iPhone 17 was claimed to have up to 30 hours of battery life. And they announced that iPhone first. Then they announced the iPhone 17 Air, which, according to Apple's website, only gets up to 27 hours of battery life. So I'm not entirely sure how you can make the claim that the iPhone 17 Air is the most power efficient iPhone ever when it's clearly not. And especially with how you um presented them, right? You presented it. Now, if you presented the iPhone 17 Air first, technically, yes, you could make that argument because the other iPhones hadn't been released yet. So, as of this point in the keynote, yes, it is the most power efficient iPhone ever. Now, I guess maybe they could be going at the angle of, yes, the battery life isn't as good, but power efficiency is better. Now, that is a very key distinction, because you can have something with better battery life that's not necessarily as efficient. Think of it with cars. And I know I'm giving a car analogy here, which might not make sense, but trust me, it will. You can have a car that gets fantastic miles per gallon, but can have less range than a gas guzzler. And the reason for that is it comes down to how much fuel you can put in your tank, right? So it doesn't matter if your car gets, say, 100 miles to the gallon, if its gas tank is only 2 gallons, compared to, say another car that gets like 30 miles to the gallon, but it holds, say, like 20 gallons. obviously you're going to be able to go further on the car that gets worse gas mileage because it can hold more gas. So that's kind of, I guess, the difference here between most power efficient versus best battery life, or in this case, range of a car. So maybe that's the angle that they're going with. I hope that's the angle that they're going with. Otherwise, that's just kind of a blatant lie. But still, I think at the end of the day, it is a little bit misleading because I think most people, when they think most efficient iPhone, it's going to get the best battery life. I think that's just kind of a thing that people will automatically go to. But at least in this case, that is not true. um, but that being said, um, going back to the iPhone 17 Air, talking about the cameras, the most notable thing is there is only one camera on the back. It's the same fusion camera as the iPhone 17. So you get a single camera, but you get your standard zoom, and then you also get a 2x telephoto, and no ultra wide with this one. It also gets the same center stage camera, like I mentioned, and the 17 Air is eSIM only, so you can't get a SIM card with the iPhone 17 Air if that was a factor for you. Um, they claimed that for maximizing internal space for battery size as their reasoning, which, I mean, that is true because if you put a SIM tray in there, you probably would even the battery size would be even smaller and the battery life would be even worse. So I get that. But also with how thin this thing is and how much real estate is a premium, I don't think there was really any feasible way that they could fit one in there, and still have the battery life be acceptable without absolutely tanking the performance of this phone. Now, as for the colors, it comes in sky blue, gold, white, and black. Also starting with 256 gigs of storage and starts at $999. So basically sliding into the old Pro line, the base Pro, the smaller ones always start at $999. Now that's where the iPhone Air slots into. And speaking of the Pro phones, this one is where things get interesting, where the head scratchers start to come into play. Now, granted, the plateau on the Air was kind of a bit of a head scratcher, but the Pro line here with the iPhone 17s, they have a very big, also have their own design head scratchers as well. They have the same plateau thing as the Air, but because there's more cameras, the plateau is bigger, and it also has this really, really weird looking two-tone thing going on. The back is not uniform at all. There's like different color shades because it's basically a unibody aluminum chassis, but then they kind of inserted this like glass back for some reason on top of it, so it has a weird two-tone. It just looks weird. If you haven't seen the back of the iPhone 17 Pro, I definitely encourage you to take a look at it. You're probably going to see the orange one since that is, I guess, their one that they're marketing heavily. It's kind of everywhere. And the reason for this weird two-tone thing, like I said, is they're inserting a ceramic shield glass thing in the back, which I'm not entirely sure why they didn't just make like the whole black aluminum, because they have the plateau thing that goes up, and I guess having to bend glass like that isn't necessarily the best for structural rigidity. I get that. And then but I don't know, just like this little rectangle thing on the back that isn't like the full width of the back and doesn't go all the way up to the camera, excuse me, the plateau. It, and the fact that the colors don't match, I don't know, it just looks weird. Maybe I'm being too nitpicky though, but the fact that it's not uniform just really irks me. Now, maybe the reason why they didn't go with aluminum was like scratch reasons. I honestly don't know. But the funny thing I also found when scrolling through the website after the keynote was their website says worth the upgrade 100%, which, I mean, I don't think that should be a shock to anyone. I mean, obviously, the company that created a project is going to think that you absolutely should buy it, of course. So, definitely not shocking there. So, as far as the sizes for the Pros, you, of course, have the Pro and the Pro Max. The Pro comes in at 6.3 inches screen size, and the Pro Max is 6.9. Again, this is like the footprint is still the same footprint. It's just they shrunk the bezels a little bit to give you a little more screen real estate. It also gets the A19 Pro, but like I said with A19 Pro, excuse me, the iPhone 17 Air, the A19 Pro in the Air model was the binned version, so it had 5 GPU cores. Um, in the A19 Pro in the iPhone 17 Pro, it gets an extra GPU core, so 6. It also has a vapor chamber, which is new to iPhones but not new to the industry at large. And basically all what this does is it improves the cooling performance of the phone, so you would be able to get better sustained performance. Apple is claiming 40% better sustained performance compared to the iPhone 16 Pro. Also gets the N1 and C1X. Cameras, a little bit kind of a similar story. They didn't really talk too much about cameras. All three cameras on the back of the Pro lines are 48 megapixel cameras. There's now a 2x, 4x, and 8x optical zoom, as well as your standard and ultra wide. So that's pretty cool. If you want to go with the digital zoom, of course, that's not going to be as good of a quality as an optical zoom, but the digital zoom, you can now go up to 40 times zoom, which is kind of impressive. It gets the same center stage front facing camera as the previous iPhones that we mentioned, and is now able to record in ProRes RAW, which I think for most people probably doesn't matter. But if you deal with those like, pretty advanced codecs, this is the ProRes RAW is like Apple's own codec. So if you care about like recording video and stuff and that matters to you, that's probably pretty cool. But I think for the average person just looking to buy an iPhone, that probably doesn't really mean much to them, which I totally understand. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me either. My main understanding is it basically captures all of the possible data captured from the camera sensor and embeds it into the video feed, which basically gives you better control to like adjust colors and things like that, I guess, when you're doing the editing portion. That's the best way I can describe it of from what my understanding is. Now, as far as battery life goes, they're touting up to 33 and 39 hours of battery life respectively for both the Pro and the Pro Max. Now, here is where another head scratcher comes into play. So we already touched on the head scratcher that is the design of the Pro line, but the other head scratcher is there is no black color or space gray or dark gray black type color. You either get so if you wanted a kind of a black type color, you're kind of out of luck this year if you want a Pro phone. The only colors that you get is three colors. You get a silver color, their very, very loud orange color, which they're calling cosmic orange, and then deep blue, again, like I said, with that trusty white slash silver color. Now, I will say, with how much they've been pushing in the marketing the orange color and how much I've seen it, it is, I hate to admit this, but I think it is starting to grow on me a little bit. Now, it still looks super weird, with that weird, like, two-tone thing going on, with the whole, like, glass versus aluminum, the colors not fully matching and not being uniform. That still is absolutely an eyesore to me. But as far as, like, the orange color itself, at least for the aluminum, I don't necessarily hate it. But again, that weird eyesore of a two-tone thing, it's just I don't know. I just don't like it. But anyway, the base Pro, so the 6.3-inch Pro phone gets a $100 price bump. The Max is still the same as last year. Now, we should mention, and Apple was of course sure to point this out in the keynote when they talked about pricing. Yes, the iPhone 17 Pro is $100 more expensive, but the it's the same price as the iPhone 16 Pro if you got the 256 gig model, which is the same stunt they pulled when they upgraded the Pro Max phone to 256 gigs. I think they either did that last year or the year before and gave it a $100 price increase. They did this. They gave the same line, which, I mean, I guess you can't knock them for that because, yeah, it's technically, yes, it's a price increase, but they also increased the storage size for you too. So, I mean, the haters are going to hate on it and the Apple sheep are going to defend it. So, what are you going to do? I guess I gave you the information. You can make your own conclusions. So yes, the iPhone 17 Pro now starts at $1099 and the iPhone 17 Pro Max starts at $1199. And again, like for all the other products we talked about today, pre-orders, you can pre-order them now and availability starts on September 19th. So that was the Apple event. Like I said, there were some pretty impressive features and also some head scratchers as well. I think out of all of these things, I think probably the AirPods Pro 3 is the one that I'm most likely to get. I don't think I'll be upgrading my iPhone, partly because I'm a little iffy on the design of the Pros, and just quite frankly, my phone doesn't really need to be upgraded. I think, like I said, the battery life isn't obviously as good as it used to be, but it still is more than adequate to get me through the day. Performance is still more than adequate, so I don't really have a need to upgrade it. So yeah, but I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts were if you watched the keynote, or if you just listened to this kind of reaction to it. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. If you're on YouTube, you can of course leave a comment down below, or if you're on podcast, you can shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com. And if you haven't already, definitely be sure to leave the podcast a rating, give it a like, subscribe, give it a review, all that good stuff. And if you have any questions about this week's episode or have any comments or topic ideas for future episodes, if you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below, or you can always shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com, especially if you're on podcast because there is no comment section. But that is going to do it for me in this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Until next time, my fellow assassins, remember, bull nothing equals true. If action not equal to null, return true. I'll see you next time on the Dark Assassins podcast.